Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and I'm going to talk about point 2 patch minion issues. Basically, this is going to be me ranting for a little bit. I thought it's going to be a little shorter list, but anyways, I'm going to go through this list. So it's going to be a bit of a ranty video. So strap in, lean back, chill. Don't even have to watch me. Just listen, I guess. A little talkative approach here. Anyways, right, it's a YouTube video. Like button, subscribe, leave a comment, all of that shit. It helps the channel out a lot. Let's just crack into it. So, before going through the issues, I do want to underline that I actually do find myself enjoying playing the game. Last build I've been playing, it's probably posted on YouTube already by the time of this being coming up. I'm playing a Lich SRS build, and it's pretty crazy. It's really crazy. There's some crazy things that is surely going to be nerfed. And I'm sorry for that, but it needs to get nerfed. Let me show you. This is me being on the toilet. That's the chair playing. I'm actually holding down right click with my mouse, but whilst I'm on the toilet. But this is a tier 4 Breach Lord Cest, and I can't die.
Oh well, I'm pretty pleased with this build.
I can't die. Which is kind of fun.
I think this
You
will
see,
do this.
the vision that GHAZZY has put on us is that if anything touches us, we get stunned. As a result, we can, in a high energy shield build, use something like energy barrier. And as long as we're casting and something touches us, we're gonna get stunned because everything stuns us in this game. And this means by energy shield, it doesn't get interrupted and it starts. The recharge starts immediately. That's how that mechanic works, which is kind of crazy. Pretty fun. Either way, let's make sure that noise isn't in the background. So I want to talk about the issues with minions specifically. These are issues that most of these I've experienced myself. Some are taken from chat, and I'm sure I missed something. If I've missed something, please let me know in the comments below. Let's start with this video. So let's talk about skeletal minions, and I'm talking about the general approach to skeletal minions. Basically all of them, they severely lack in terms of survivability. There are other issues in terms of damage output being pretty drastically nerfed as well, whereas storm mages were the minions that were hit the least on these nerfs, which is why most of our endgame builds have actually utilized storm mages. And if you don't use storm mages, you kind of opt into like a chaos-focused approach on snipers, simply because snipers have the best aggro range and best AI design and area coverage for effective playstyles. I really wanted to make Reavers work well. The problem with Reavers is that there's another issue. We get to that one, which is Font of Rage doesn't give them rage, and therefore you have to kill them to make them good. And even then, Spectres do better, and there's other issues with Spectres. Anyway, skeletal minions, they survivability lack, and damage is a bit wonky. One of the biggest issues is something I've experienced several times. The map boss can wipe them all out in one of their AoE attacks, even if you have all of the minion nodes on the north half of the entire skill tree. And if you're then unlucky, when they then get resurrected, they might resurrect right in time to get wiped again by the next AoE attack from the boss. I had this happen a couple of times that pissed me off. I also want to point out that I have sent most, if not all of these things to GGG and Jonathan. So it's not my job to find solutions. It's honestly not my job to provide them with this feedback either, but it is early access game right now, and the only thing we can do as players is provide them with feedback and hope that they will do good with with that information. So that's what we're doing. Moving on, Spectres. There's quite a few things to cover here on Spectres. First off is the Wisp form bug. Basically, what happens is that when they reach the state of becoming a Wisp, which is when you outrange them, but not far enough for them to die and resurrect right next to you, but a bit of a distance before that, it's a really cool mechanic. They turn into a wisp and fly all the way to you and then, become a minion again. However, the bug is that sometimes these wisps don't move. And there's only a couple of methods to fixing this issue. One is outranging that wisp so it dies and then is revived next to you. The other solution is manually controlling your minions to move to your position so the wisp gets close enough to you to resurrect. However, this makes all your currently actively fighting minions also stop attacking to move to you. And if you move away before the wisp has reached you, then the wisp is now stationary, standing where you told them to move, but that's not where you are right now, so you have to move them again. It's frustrating as fuck. Another thing to point out is that the wisp themselves can still be aggroed and attacked by enemies, and they can die in this form as well, which is really funny. Not. But it's kind of funny. Mobility issues with Spectres. Most Spectrable minions are extremely slow, making them completely unplayable, which is why we're choosing to run Spectres, which has a good movement speed, so they can keep up. And this is also a problem, even if they were to fix the Wisp form bug. The AI is just not aggressive, or the behavior in general is just not good enough to play around, which kind of alienates a large chunk of the 400 plus different Spectrable minions that we can get in the game. And I know someone wrote to me a couple weeks ago. They said, it's funny how you have dangerous enemies, but if you race them as a Spectre, they're just shit, or something along those lines, which kind of feels like the accurate description, because the spirit cost is obviously something we expect it to be kind of wild. Most Spectres have a rather brutal DPS per spirit cost, taking behavior aside. So if I completely ignore their behavior and look at the DPS calculation per spirit invested, Volguards being the best expected Spectre performing, if we assume they're shotgunning with the grenades on a monster level 60 scaling, which is kind of like the normal high end you'll expect to reach for most people, they have about 14 DPS per spirit invested as a baseline. The problem with this is that you have other super squishy Spectres, such as Nettle Ants, which have a 6 DPS per spirit. The problem with Nettle Ants is that they have a large quantity because of low spirit cost, and they provide a good area coverage with us. The issue with that is that they also body block each other due to being that many, and due to being melee, they also suffer from narrow corridors and tight hallways, and they're also less tanky, and they tend to die, making them a poor choice by default. And this is a common theme for minion builds in general, even in Path of Exile 1, where we are heavily incentivized to run ranged Spectres with good area coverage, or your clear speed suffers way too much, and this is more pressing in PoE 2 than ever. And these two examples are prime for the issue at hand, and this becomes an even bigger problem with the options, with other options, as their DPS per spirit goes down to like 2 to 3 DPS per spirit, making them completely irrelevant. And this is, again, taking AI aside, which is kind of sad. We looked at a guy called Ravenous Brutes, really cool. I think they had a 3.15 DPS, good AI, good behavior in terms of a melee Spectre, and we tested this the other night. The problem with that is that they cost so much spirit that you get fewer minions of them, and because they were fewer and have to go into melee range, they suffer the narrow hallways, the corridors, and the issue they had was that they weren't aggressive enough to engage in fights, that you couldn't beat the Breach Lord Timer on a higher tier, even with pretty crazy gear. Well, a weapon could be better, I guess, but pretty damn good gear. And they weren't able to clear that. But if I went for something that had a 2.8 DPS per spirit, I think it was a 2. That was probably a little bit less. Something like the Blade Lash Transcendence, I was able to summon more of them. And because of that, even though the damage was lower, their behavior was allowing me to actually have a better area coverage due to quantity on melee minions. But they were also able to actually beat the timer, but not always. But if I ran something like Volguards, it was fine. Now I could beat the timer, I could kill the boss. I get there because they have better area coverage and they actually are ranged. So there's a lot of issues with this in general, but most of it comes down to spirit cost, because if that's better balanced, then sure, it will be better to play with. But we can't expect them to hit the sweet spot, the spirit cost balance for over 400 minions, which is why Spectres in general has always created this dance between GGG and players. We do this in PoE 1 as well. We find the best Spectre, we play with that till they nerf the shit out of it, and then we find the second best Spectre, then we play with that till they nerf the shit out of that, rinse and repeat that dance till the next patch comes in and they make changes and they introduce new monsters. Well, guess what? We're back on track with that dance again. We find the best Spectre, we play with till they nerf it, and we play the next one. And it's just going to be the same thing here. But I think that the current state of Spectres hasn't given as many things to choose between that does perform at a tier 4 bossing scale kind of state. A lot of Spectres seems to be functional on like clearing tier 14, 15, 16 maps, can do tiers 1, maybe tier 2 bosses. But as soon as you go up to higher tier content, the choices get so limited, and you have to look at the ones that gives you the best damage per spirit invested. And it's kind of annoying, but mostly the Spectre issues comes down to mobility that alienates a lot of different choices that could have been good, and obviously the Wisp form bug. Another issue with Spectres is despawning corpses. I haven't personally seen this, but I was told from multiple people that they have sometimes corpses from a minion that you want, they disappear faster than the cast time of Bind Spectre. So you kill an enemy and you're about to summon it, and then the corpse disappears for some reason without having any methods of consuming the corpses. They just disappear. So a guy suggested leveling a Chronomancer to time freeze to be able to get the one you wanted. So there's a couple of issues with that as well at the moment. Skeletal Storm Mage, we talked about this before. When attacking an enemy from max range, they basically have an aggro range of starting to cast Arc on an enemy outside of the range that their Arc can actually reach. So their Arc starts hitting like the feet or just in front of the target, dealing no damage because you're actually not hitting anything. And the only way to solve this is to literally manually move your minions closer to the target to be able to do damage, which is frustrating as fuck. Mashira, thanks so much for the 23 months, man. So another thing we brought up in this document is scaling in general. Currently, the game expects you to have X amount of plus level of your gems, but it gets rather absurd for minion builds in general as we lack other options of scaling, generally speaking. So when you look at attack-based builds, you can have plus level of melee skills, so you can have plus level of projectile skills or whatever, right? You can have plus level of fire, cold, lightning skills. But then you can have attack damage, spell damage, attack speed, crit chance, all these things you can scale your minions, or scale your builds with. But for minions, I mean, we have the Scepter. And then you have, like, what? Plus level of minions? 3 from the amulet, 2 from the helmet, 4 from the weapon. And the game expects you to have certain levels of this, but you don't really have other options of scaling them. They're very limited. Ever-grasping rings? Sure. But we don't have things like bone rings that we have in PoE. We don't have minion damage modifiers and other things. You have spell damage mods, for example, on rings and an amulet cast speed on rings. We don't have any of those things for minions. Like, we're so limited in what we can scale with. So we can pick up every single node on the north half of the passive skill tree, which is where the minions are basically located on the skill tree, and still have issues with keeping them alive or deal respectable damage compared to other builds in the game, which is quite frustrating. And most of that comes down to just lack of options to scale them. And I made a note here saying this becomes even more of an issue when you have skills such as snipers having every tag you could ever want: chaos, minion, fire, persistent, and offering more options to scale their levels. Not scaling their damage, but you have more options to scaling their levels, as well as support gems for that matter. But if you compare that to something like Spectres, you only have minion and persistent. Like, we're left with like no choices. There's no options to scale them outside of minion mastery, level of minion skills on helmet, amulet, and scepter. There you go. That's it. Everything else has to be external. And that's it. But snipers have options. That's why snipers are one of the competitive endgame minion builds compared together with skeletal storm mages. But this spills over to the other skeletal minions as well for the most part. But at least storm mages, for example, have lightning tag, and arsonists have fire tag. So there are some variations there. But due to the tag system and the current state of the game for scaling, it's not fun. I'll tell you that. Tame beast fishing. I've talked about this before. This is a very frustrating thing. I'm not going to show you in this video because I've done it so many times. I fucking hate it. Tamed beast, the way this works is very tricky. The thematic approach of it is to tame an active, alive beast to become your minion. That means that thematically, you're supposed to use a skill on a monster that is alive, not dead. This means that you will have to make sure you don't kill whatever rare that you might want to use, check if the mods are the correct you want, as well as verify the monster type, because the spirit cost reservation is associated with the monster type. Now you're in a position where you have to verify these things while staying alive, whilst not doing damage, so you don't accidentally kill it. Then confirm that, oh shit, I want that motherfucker. So what do? You click the spell. This is now a gem that you have to put in your skill gem section that takes away a skill from your actions, or from your options of using your toolkit, essentially, to have that available to use on the monster to then kill it within time to then tame it. Okay, that sounds a bit wonky, but sure. The problem with this is that we are now heavily incentivized to fish for at least a 2-modded beast in the campaign, as trying to find the correct one in endgame map is just not feasible. You have to sacrifice a skill slot as mentioned to begin with, and then somehow manage to avoid killing a rare in the map, as I just talked about. And then the suggested idea of letting us use the skill on a corpse would solve the problem for the most part, and diminish the value of fishing for something in the campaign. However, it would go against the entire theme of the skill, like I mentioned, because now you're no longer taming an alive beast, you're resurrecting a dead one, right? But if you do the fishing, you can guarantee find a specific type of monster you're looking for and try to find the one with the correct modifiers for this as well. So what is the fishing? So let me do a little quick recap or explanation of this. If you go to specific areas of the campaign that have like the troubled camp in infested barrens, that's where I found the beast that I'm using right now. That one has a specific boar, a dire tusk boar, which has a 39% spirit reservation, I think it is, base. So I can guarantee get a specific X amount of spirit reservation beast. I know it's a medium movement speed tagged monster, so it can spawn with hasted aura, which means that I can just go there, check the actual beast if it has the correct monster I want, because there's a guaranteed rare spawn with that. And if it's not the right one, I don't have any damage. I unsummon all my minions. I will respawn a checkpoint, and that monster will respawn because I never killed it with new set of modifiers. Then I'll go and check the modifiers. Oh shit, it's not the one I want. Guess what? Click escape, click respawn a checkpoint, and go again. And you repeat this process for hours to find the ones you want. It is not a fun way to play. I fished for, I think, about an hour to get my 2-modded beast. And I heard some people spend 6, 7, 8 hours to find a 3-modded beast. That's no way of playing the game. So I don't know what the solution is, but the current state that they have it in is not good. And I don't know how they're going to fix that. I think that I would also want to point out that giving player too much player agency over this would not be good either, because now you don't have this idea of, oh, you found the 2 mods you wanted, and it also had this cool thing, because if you have too much player agency in it, you end up being like, well, I'm only going to run the best, or I'm not going to run it at all. So I don't know how they're going to balance that to be in a good state, but I wanted to bring it up because it's quite frustrating to do the fishing. Raining Spirits. I was not happy with this change in the patch notes. First and foremost, tooltip, please. The tooltip is just... And speaking of tooltip, accuracy in-game for minions is wildly off in the game. PUB solves this issue for us, but that doesn't help the casual Andy who doesn't use PUB, who thinks his minions have a 100% chance to hit, when in reality it's closer to 90%. Like, something needs to happen, because that information, people use that as a template to say, oh, I don't need to invest more into accuracy from minions, they're always going to hit. When in reality they don't. They lose 1/10 of their attacks. Like, that's awful. That's the information in the game being incorrect, and people play accordingly, and that provides a worse performance of their minion builds compared to what it should be if they had correct information that the game provides. Other issue with Tooltip is the absence on them from most Spectre minions. Things like minions having double the lines of their resistance, making it even more confusing exists as well. Obviously, for SRS, we have to talk about the summoning of 2 spirits per cast as the cap, no matter how many projectiles or big AoE you have. This has turned SRS builds into a cast speed focused approach, where we more or less do nothing but cast 1 spell at a time to keep them up. This here is a Spectre build. I have a haste aura from my Tame beast, and that puts me at cast speed at 0.59. If I remove the haste from the Tame beast, it's a 0.69 cast speed. Like, I get 100 ms faster cast speed in this. And the way I summon my minion, I have to hold this button down for so long to get my 11 Spectre SRS out. So when I'm playing this build, I'm basically blinking. I cast minions out. I move to the next pack. I cast some more out. All right, next pack. Cast some more out. Blink to the next pack. It's like, I'm not doing the meaningful combat at the moment. I'm just holding down right click. Oh, a boss? Let me pre-cast with a Cursed Ground. The Voltaic Mark and then a Pain Offering. And then I'm holding down right click. Why? Because it's the only way to get my damn minions out on the field. It's quite frustrating. I don't know how they're going to fix that. It also made it less valuable to use when clearing. the campaign for leveling approaches. You can still do it, but you're gonna need cast speed to make this feel good. And I mean more than just arcane tempo support on your flame wall. And I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the way it's set up right now because SRS was really strong for leveling earlier because you could get those minions out. But I mean, in the current state, it's just meh. And for endgame, you need to actually invest quite heavily into minion survivability to keep them alive to do well already. So the build just feels kind of weird with the way they have it with SRS right now. Let's talk about AI. Minions in general lack aggressiveness to feel good to play. This is a common issue specifically for Spectres, but it spreads to all minions in general. Sniper Skeletals, as I mentioned earlier, do pretty well due to having a very long aggro range, allowing them to engage enemies at a comfortable distance. But they also bring an offensive approach to capitalize on that behavior, and this is something no other minion builds has to the same extent. And just AI lacking, we need them to be faster moving. We need them to actually be able to aggressively, engage in fights more aggressively. And in PoE 1, they solved this by having a support gem called Feeding Frenzy, which exists in PoE 2. But in PoE 2, the Feeding Frenzy makes the enemy deal more damage and take more damage instead of making them more aggressive. I think that the AI aggressiveness of making minions willing to engage in fights is the key to making them feel good. Don't get me wrong, I'm an advocate for Convocation, which is a PoE skill that teleports your minions to you. I don't think that's the answer to fixing minions in PoE 2. I think the answer to fixing minions in PoE 2 has to do with making them more aggressive and faster in terms of moving so that you can actually play with them in a more comfortable way. I think that's the answer, which would be a better way to solve the issue rather than just give us Convocation, because I don't think that's a good solution. Quickly talk about melee. So clear efficiency is frustrating as there's no proper way for them to work with things such as melee splash, which is something we have in PoE 1, which would be a nice addition to help melee in general. I can't speak for non-minions melee builds, but for minions, that would actually be a good solution, because I wouldn't mind having a support giving melee skills or melee minions splash at the cost of damage, which is what we do in PoE 1. This is solved by the Lich's tendency to create pops with the Profane Bloom. It's called Rupture the Soul in PoE 2. That's how we actually clear with the SRS build use. I've paused here in the background. But yeah, I don't know. I think that melee in general for minions feels very underwhelming since they don't have other sources of being able to clear more than one enemy at a time. Speaking of melee, let's talk about Font of Rage. I'm sure you guys have seen plenty of build guides out there on YouTube. Hell, I even had some, but I've been fixing that now. I think most people just chuck this in, assuming it works. Font of Rage does not give rage to your minions, which is insanely bad for something like Reaver Skeletons, which is why they're not the best. They scale very well with rage. So it gives rage to the player, and we have confirmed this, that it's just both visually and tooltip-wise, your minions simply do not get rage from Font of Rage support. It just doesn't work. Players get it, but not your minions. Not even the companion gets the rage at all. None of them. And it's just... it's a bug. It doesn't work. But that means your attack-based minions lose 30% damage. That's a lot of goddamn damage. Anyway, speaking of bugs, Dance Macabre support, when running something like a Sacrificial Lamb support, which makes it so that offerings will target the Sacrificial Lamb supported minion, the second minion being consumed by Dance Macabre does not target the Sacrificial Lamb supported minion, but rather just a random minion. So if you have two Skeletal Warriors from a Rattling Scepter, which is basically what you should be playing with, and you have them with Sacrificial Lamb, and you pop a Dance Macabre supported offering, one goes on the Skeletal Warrior. The second one is random, which means you don't want to run Dance Macabre, because now you're going to lose spirit costing reserving minions that is supposed to be there for either utility, debuffing, buffing, or actual just straight up damage output. Is now being consumed by your offering. So you don't want to run this because it's bugged, which is quite frustrating as well. Speaking of Rattling Scepters, Rattling Scepter being the only viable Scepter base due to requiring sacrificial minions with Sacrificial Lamb support, as mentioned, that don't cost you spirit for your offerings. This also becomes even more important now because we run the Muster support. And Muster support is something that scales 7% more damage to your minion per different type of minion. And no, you cannot stack a bunch of different Spectres. Only one Spectre would scale it. Because we have to run more different types of minions to scale muster, we're even more incentivized to using a Rattling Scepter. This means that all the resistance scepters are completely irrelevant. It makes the mystery one for crit weakness, which is actually a good scepter, irrelevant because you have to run the Rattling Scepter. You have to, because you need it for muster and you need it for the sack lamb offerings. You don't have a choice. So any other scepter is wasted. You would never use it. Speaking of bugs, unset ring bug. If you run a lot of permanent minions, mostly occurring when you have Spectres. This also happens with Spectres if you die, by the way. Weapon swapping with an unset ring despawns all your minions, and you'll have to swap back and forth till it just randomly starts working, or you have to manually adjust your spirit reservation to get them back. So if I do a weapon swap, I don't have the set right now, I'd have to go to my menu, and all my minions would be dead, and I have to like do this on one of my minions to get all of the minions back again. It is such a frustrating bug, and it only happens with unset rings. It works fine with other builds, because caster builds are incentivized to using Sigil of Power through a weapon swap to get more damage. And my build right now is fine with it, because I can use a weapon swap for a curse, and I don't use a bunch of permanent minions that causes this bug to happen. But for caster builds like Storm Mages and whatnot, you can't use an unset ring simply because the build is incentivized to use a Sigil of Power. And when you swap back, well, now your minions are gone. So you had pre-cast you just did is completely irrelevant, because now you have to start fiddling with your restoration to get your minions back in action. So that's another bug. Let's talk about temporary summon minions. There's an outrange issue. So when you outrange minions, let's ignore Spectres for a while. When you outrange them, they die and they get resurrected right next to you immediately. That's great, right? The problem is that temporary summon minions, they don't revive, which means that when you outrange them, and you will because you're moving way faster, you're not very fast, but your minions are even slower than that, and they get body blocked and stuck in hallways, corridors, and whatnot, and tight corners. When you outrange them, they just die. So that means that your temp minions have to be resummoned on a consistent basis all the time, more or less. Zombies, specifically, they lack performance in general, even when you summon them using power charges. They're wonky, and they just do not do enough damage output or survive enough to be able to be performing. And Unearth actually could be pretty damn good for bosses specifically. The problem with Unearth is that they require some wonky shenanigans where you weapon swap to a horde of terracotta soldiers with a sacrifice buff to then consume all of those with your Unearth to summon your minion and then swap back to the other weapon set to do your actual damage. This will be easier once they provide things like the locking your weapons for weapon swapping and whatnot. Problem with this, though, is a properly scaled Unearth build with a 6th link set up on the Unearth costs way more than 1,000 mana per cast. Like, if I did that right now, I have 1,012 mana. I would not have enough mana to cast a skill even once because of the scaling of it. Like, I think the cost I would have on the setup I was theory crafting had 1,400 mana cost. That's 1.4 thousand mana to cast it once. It's just, okay. I don't know, man. It just needs some attention. Another thing to point out is integrated efficiency. It is the Gemlin Legionnaire node right here. This one says that the skill gain 20% crit per blue support, 20% increased damage per red support, and 6% skill speed per green support. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for minions. It doesn't work for companions. It just does not work. I'm not sure if that's intended, but the way the wording states, it indicates that it should work. Anyways, this has been a pretty long ranting video. I think these are the main issues with minions at the moment from 0.2 patch that I've experienced, and then some, and that I would like to shed some light to and bring, put some attention to it. Maybe I missed something. If you agree or disagree with any of these, or have anything to add, or maybe I missed something, let me know in the comments below. And yeah, as always, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. And again, like I said before, all we can do in early access is provide as much feedback we can to GHAZZY, and hopefully they'll fix all of this. That's basically it. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe and keep rocking.